The white van that followed me through a snowstorm. I'm a 21-year-old female and this story took place when I was around 11. I remember this day clearly because it was the first time I was ever allowed to walk to school and back by myself. Up until the age of 14 I lived in what we thought was a safe place in Chautauqua County, New York. Everyone knew everyone. If you thought you would get away with something, then be prepared to have your ear abused by the time you got home. There was this one day though. It was a cold winter day and school unfortunately was still open, so all the neighborhood kids had to walk through knee-high inches of snow just to get to school. It took me longer to leave the house as I was used to walking with my older sister to school since she knew the routes better than me. I always used to make fun of her for being paranoid and taking a different route every day from school, but after that day, I learned that was what saved my life. As I was waiting by the door to leave, my mom came up to me and told me that I should ride with her to drop me off because my sister was too sick to go today. Being a brat, I made a big deal about walking by myself because I was almost 12 years old and all my friends' parents let them walk alone. She looked at me for a long while then told me to make sure I pay attention to cars. I got hit by a car and almost died when I was 9, so the worry that showed on her face was well warranted. Hurriedly nodded and headed out the door to go to school. My sister didn't like to dilly-dally, so she was always in a rush to get to school early, but seeing as it was just me, I thought it would be a good idea to take my time. I would play in the brown slush that was left on the side of the road and even make funny-looking snowballs to see how far I can throw them. Halfway to school I notice a white van following behind me. Being the playful child I was, if I had not been bending down to make another snowball I wouldn't have noticed it slowly creeping up the street. I told myself I was being stupid but continued more hurriedly to school. Once I got to school I took a quick glance over my shoulder and saw the van a few feet behind me. It wasn't until I was on school grounds that it drove away fast by me. I thought that would be the end of it, but throughout the day when I would stare out the window, the van would be there. I assumed that it never really left, just parked. Many adults would try convince me years later that maybe it wasn't the same one, but I knew it was. This van had a bright yellow smile emoji sticker on it. I couldn't see who was in the van, but through the tinted glass, I knew they could see me. It was now the end of the day and I wasn't ready to go home. It was too late to call my mom, because she was at work and my sister was homesick. I had to suck it up and start walking home. I tried to blend in with a group of kids, but most of them were car riders and the others didn't live near me. Remembering what my sister told me, I took another route home. I didn't memorize this route clearly, but I decided anything was better than being spotted by that van. I made it to my main street but realized my mistake too late. The route I took led back to the main street where I walked to school. Hidden behind a row of cars was the white van with the smiley emoji sticker. I tried to stay calm and walk past it, but once I heard the van door silently click open, I ran. I could hear the rush of 2 pairs of heavy footfalls behind me. They were getting closer, so I did what any normal kid would do. I cut corners. I cut into someone's backyard until I was directly inside of my house and forced myself into the thick snow to make it to the door. My heart was racing, not because I was running but because I could still hear them behind me. I made it to the door and banged with all my might until someone came to the door. My sister looked confused, but one look at my face and she pulled me inside and locked the doors. The van was still outside. Truthfully, it stayed out there until my brother got home. Me and my sister don't talk about it, but we both knew how close it was to me going missing. I hadn't thought about this incident in years, but one of my hometown friends showed me an article that came out in 2013. Apparently some men kidnapped and sexually assaulted a girl my age. It wouldn't have scared me if it hadn't mentioned the white van. Whoever you are that attempted to kidnap me and do God knows what else, let's not meet. Men in the snow. This encounter is real, and happened to me 6 years ago, when I was 16. For context, I'm female. I live in New England, a northeastern region of the United States, where the winters are very snowy, with long, cold, dark nights and short days. One such night in February, I was alone in my parents' house, which is in a safe, quiet suburban neighborhood where the houses are within about 100 feet of each other. My parents had divorced years before and were still on good terms, so when my mom decided to sell the childhood home, my dad bought it so I could continue living there. While in the process of moving, neither of my parents stayed at the house for a couple of nights. And only my room upstairs had furniture. The rest of the house was mostly empty with boxes scattered about. and the internet had not yet been switched over, so I often sat at the far end of the living room and mooched off of our neighbor's Wi-Fi. It was fun not having my parents there for a couple of nights, so I stayed up late with my new laptop and surfed the web into the early hours of the morning. During my second night of being alone, it snowed late into the evening and I sat in the dark living room on a folding chair with only my laptop screen for light, with snow falling quietly outside. The neighborhood was silent, as cars don't usually drive by past 10 at night, and neighbors stay inside to keep warm. At 2:30 a.m., I decided to head to bed, and was wrapping up my internet activities for the night when I heard 3 very slow, quiet knocks on the front door, just a few feet away. I immediately closed my laptop, knowing that the bright screen made me visible to the person outside since the windows weren't covered. I got off my chair and walked very quietly over to the door and knelt down below a window to listen outside. Frozen with fear, I waited for what was probably about 2 full minutes when I heard 3 more identical knocks. They were very slow and would have been 2. I got off my chair and walked very quietly over to the door and knelt down below a window to listen outside. Frozen with fear, I waited for what was probably about 2 full minutes when I heard 3 more identical knocks. They were very slow and would have been too quiet to wake anyone up who had been sleeping. I gathered the courage to look outside through the window and saw a dark figure standing very close to the front door, dressed in a black winter coat and black pants. A hood pulled over his head obscured his hair and face, and he stood still with his arms to his sides. I contemplated calling the police but ultimately decided to continue waiting. I moved back behind the door away from the window. And after about 2 more minutes passed, I could see the man walking down the walkway past the front of the house, leaving. Suddenly, he stopped, turned around, and looked directly at the window through which I watched him. About 15 seconds passed as we stared at each other, but I couldn't see his face under the darkness of his hood. Finally he turned around and walked down the driveway and down the street. He didn't stop at any other houses, just continued down the street in the falling snow, and I watched him for about 10 minutes until he faded into the darkness. As far as I know, this has not happened since then. I still live in that house, and occasionally have nightmares in which the scene replays itself. Except that in the dreams, I open the door for him. Footsteps in the snow. A few years ago when I still lived in upstate New York, something really freaky happened to me. If you've ever been to upstate New York during the winters, you would know that it can snow a lot. I spent snowy nights watching TV. I lived about a mile or so from any other house, and my roommate was out. Now, I'll be honest, being alone made me feel uncomfortable. I've always had an overactive imagination, and a small noise and really freaked me out. Like I was saying, my roommate was out, and it was snowing heavily. It was probably like 9 or 10 at night, and I was watching TV, like normal. All of a sudden I heard a crunch outside, like someone stepping on ice. I immediately tensed up and my mind raced to every possibility. It wasn't my roommate, since I didn't hear a car. I listened in horror as I could hear the crunches getting louder. I ran into my room and locked the door. I got out my shotgun and I grabbed my phone ready to call 911, just in case. I know it might seem like I was overreacting, but remember, this is at night, in heavy snow, miles away from any other house. Who could possibly be outside? The footsteps just stopped at some point. I eventually fell asleep, and when I woke up my roommate was back. I went outside to see if I could find any evidence of who was outside, and what I found still haunts me. I saw footprints in the snow coming out of the woods and circling around my house. The footprints were filled in for the most part, so it was hard to figure out where they were going. The scariest part of all this is that the footprints stop outside my bedroom window. The other footprints were filled in, but these were fresh, as if someone had been standing there all night, since the snow stopped early in the morning. To this day it still scares me. I don't know what kind of person would be out in those woods. The fact that while I was in my room, they were standing outside my window, still freaks me out. Let's not meet again.